I knew something was wrong the second Richard cleared his throat in that fake-ass formal way. He saves for delivering bad news in a celebratory tone. You could practically hear the sound of a guillotine behind the donuts and laminated org chart. Let's all give a warm welcome to our new director of strategy, Caroline. He beamed, clapping like we were at a damn wedding shower and not a leadership summit. And there she was, Caroline, his sister, in a Barbie pink blazer with tags still on it and zero idea what half the acronyms in our weekly reports even meant. I'd been building our operational backbone for 9 years. 9. And she'd been here 5 months. Once asked if back-end devs worked in the warehouse. Swear to God. Not a single head turned to me. Not one glance from the team I trained, coached, carried. My jaw didn't twitch. My hands didn't clench. I just smiled big, cold, and empty and said, "Best to Caroline." My voice was smooth, but inside I felt something rupture. The kind of break you don't scream about. The kind that goes quiet, strategic, final. And hey, before we go any further, 97% of folks listen to stories like this without hitting that subscribe button. If this kind of raw, quiet revenge hits you in the gut, do me a favor, like the video, hit subscribe. It keeps this going and lets the team know you're in this with us. Now back to the circus. Caroline laughed like she just won a damn Grammy. Not been handed a role she didn't understand with stakes she couldn't spell. She made a joke about bringing fresh vibes to our data game, and I swear I felt a part of my frontal lobe die. Meanwhile, Richard avoided my eyes like a man who knew he'd just pissed on a legacy and lit a match. I wasn't even surprised. That was the worst part. I'd seen the writing 6 months ago when Caroline showed up with her overpriced notepad, her astrology app alerts during meetings, her endless LinkedIn posts about rediscovering purpose through business brunches. But what gutted me, what really knocked the air out of me, was how easily everyone swallowed it. 9 years of flawless delivery. I'd seen us through platform migrations, client losses, market pivots, and a 3-country expansion with 1/5 the budget we needed. Hell, during the lockdown, I hand-built the remote work structure that saved this company's ass. But nepotism doesn't care about merit. It only needs lipstick, a family name, and a CEO dumb enough to think legacy means blood over brains. When the clapping died down and the meeting wrapped, I sat in my chair for exactly 7 seconds. That's how long it took to kill the old me. The woman who stayed late to mentor up-and-comers. The woman who kept quiet when Richard took credit for the systems I designed. The woman who believed loyalty mattered. I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I simply closed my laptop and walked to my office with a posture so calm it scared even me. Behind me, I heard Caroline ask someone what client churn meant. "Is that like a dessert thing?" She giggled. I laughed once. Quietly. Bitterly. And I started planning. Because if Richard thought giving his clueless sister my role was going to be the end of my story, he just made the dumbest decision of his career. It was the beginning. I kept the letter short. 2 paragraphs. No grand speech. No desperate emotion. Just facts like always. Effective 2 weeks from today, I'll be stepping down from my role as operations lead. I even thanked him for the opportunities. That was the part that made me chuckle. Opportunities. Like surviving 3 rounds of layoffs and watching half my department get axed while I held the whole damn thing together with some kind of golden favor. Like mentoring half the C-suite that now couldn't look me in the eye wasn't blood from a stone. I printed it. Signed it. Walked it to Richard's executive assistant's desk, handed it to her with a smile, and went back to my office. Quiet. No drama. If anyone noticed, they didn't say a word. Hell, they probably assumed I was running another ops audit or prepping another fire drill simulation. That's what I'd always done. Solve the disasters before anyone even noticed the building was on fire. 2 hours later, the door slammed open so hard the fake art rattled. Richard came in red-faced, holding the letter like it was radioactive. "You're joking, right?" His voice cracked. Full volume. No filter. The same man who once told me to speak softer in meetings so I didn't come off abrasive. I didn't look up immediately. Let him stew in it a second. Then I folded my laptop, stood slowly, and gestured to the gallery of team photos on my wall. Years of projects, launches, late nights, client wins. Some of them were people Richard forgot we even employed. "You chose family," I said, my voice flat as a dead battery. "I'm choosing freedom." I thought he'd have a comeback. Maybe that fake executive charm, or some attempt to convince me I was misinterpreting the situation. Instead, he looked like a man realizing his brakes were out, and the cliff was closer than he thought. "We can talk about this," he muttered, tone softening. "We can fix this." But there was nothing left to fix. My trust? Gone. My respect? Evaporated. My reason to stay? Packaged neatly in the back of my mind next to a list of every time I'd swallowed an insult, every ignored suggestion, every promotion cycle where I was told to wait just a little longer. "You don't need me," I said, smiling faintly. "You've got Caroline now." His jaw twitched. "This is emotional. You're overreacting." There it was. The classic shutdown. Emotional. The man who once cried when a client sent back a harsh email was telling me I was being emotional. I didn't even bother to respond. Just walked past him, out into the hallway where the air felt lighter than it had in years. Every step away from that office felt like reclaiming something. An inch of dignity, a shred of peace. He stood in the doorway as I left, still holding the letter like it might dissolve in his hands. Like maybe if he didn't blink, this wouldn't be happening. But it was. I'd given him 9 years. And all it took was 5 months of fluff from Caroline for him to toss it like expired milk. So now he could drink whatever was left. I was done. And I wasn't just walking out. I was walking toward something. He just didn't know it yet. 3 days after I handed in my resignation, the first ripple hit. An email. Subject line: "Quick clarification, Tuesday's strategy meeting." From one of our anchor clients, 2 6 figures a quarter long-term retainer, the kind that doesn't ask questions unless something's gone sideways. The body of the email was painfully polite, the way only corporate panic ever is. "We're unclear on the proposed restructure outlined in the deck Caroline presented. Could you clarify the impact on our account, especially regarding the API deprecation timeline?" Translation: What the hell was that presentation, and are we in trouble? I stared at the screen for a full minute. I could still picture the deck Caroline butchered. Clip art graphics, wrong logos, bullet points that looked like a BuzzFeed listicle. She'd called it a fresh approach. The client called it unclear. I called it the beginning. I crafted a 2-line reply. Friendly. Professional. Totally neutral. "Hi Mike. Appreciate you reaching out. 4 questions related to strategic delivery. Caroline is the best point of contact moving forward. Wishing you all the best." Then I deleted the thread. Not forwarded. Not BCC'd to Richard. Just gone. The next morning, I got a calendar invite labeled "Coffee Off Campus?" No details. Just the sender names. Amir and Tasha. 2 of my senior devs. The quiet type. Sharp, loyal, never made waves. The kind of people who knew where every landmine was buried in our codebase because they dug half the trenches themselves. We met at a little place across from the old streetcar stop. No small talk. Tasha opened with, "Wherever you're going, let us know." Amir nodded once, firm. "We're not sticking around for PowerPoint Barbie." He said it like a war general, not a guy who once knitted at his desk during sprints. I didn't confirm or deny anything. Just raised my coffee and said, "Appreciate the sentiment." But inside I felt it, the shift. Not loud. Not explosive. But like a pressure valve turning. These were people who didn't jump ship unless the hull was splitting. And they'd seen enough already. Back at the office, Richard was trying his damnedest to sell Caroline to the staff like she was the second coming of Steve Jobs with a skincare routine. Friday morning, he brought in breakfast tacos and announced a new Vision Cascade initiative. Whatever the hell that meant. People nodded, smiled, took the free food. But the energy? Dead. I watched from my desk. Still here, still technically employed for 1 more week. Watching the man twist himself into knots trying to convince a room full of professionals that his sister was competent. Caroline, for her part, stood near the whiteboard like she was posing for a headshot, chiming in with buzzwords like synergy loop and vibe mapping. She even made a joke about how data can be sexy, right? It landed like a balloon at a funeral. One by one I saw eyes drift toward me. Just quick glances. Like they were checking a compass that no longer pointed north. I said nothing. Just typed notes for a project I would never finish and watched the beginning of the unraveling. They didn't realize yet, not fully. But something was different. The engine was still running, sure, but no one had their hands on the wheel. And the ones who used to steer? They were quietly walking away. Or drinking coffee across town, waiting for the signal. The silence was starting to speak louder than Richard ever could. And I was just getting started. Started in a notebook. Spiral-bound, coffee-stained, pages curling at the corners from years of flipping. I called it the map, though the cover still said Q3 Workflow Redesign. Inside, it held everything, every bottleneck, every broken loop, every "we'll fix that later" band-aid I'd ever patched over for this company. Not client data, not proprietary code, just patterns. Ghost trails of chaos the execs never saw because people like me were always 2 steps ahead of disaster, sweeping the glass before they even knew it cracked. 2 years ago, I'd stayed late after a failed rollout nearly lost us a federal contract. Caroline hadn't even been hired yet. Back then, Richard still pretended to respect what I did. I remember sitting there in the server room at midnight, fan humming, legal pad in my lap, and thinking, if I left tomorrow, this place would fall apart in weeks. Not because I was special, but because I knew where the bones were buried, and how to keep them from rattling. That was the first night I sketched the outline. Not a revenge plot. Not even a backup plan. Just a lifeboat. Something of my own. Something built on structure, not suck-up politics and executive golf trips. I started logging anonymized patterns, why clients churned, where projects collapsed, how departments bled money while bragging about growth trajectories. I cleaned the data, generalized the examples, and began shaping it into a scalable model. A framework any mid-sized tech company could plug into to see their blind spots in real time. I called it Project Lantern. Because light doesn't fix anything. It just shows you what's really there. 6 months in, I looped in my old college friend Lydia, now a contracts attorney specializing in IP law. I told her the truth. I wasn't stealing a damn thing. I just wanted to make sure what I was building couldn't be touched once it was out in the world. She spent 2 weeks going through my drafts, redlining anything risky, tightening the language. When she was done, she sent back a 3-word message. You're golden. Run. I didn't run. Not yet. I stayed. Kept building. Kept saving the company from itself while quietly creating the architecture for a business they'd never believe I had the spine to launch. Now, I stood in front of my laptop in a silent apartment, cursor blinking on a legal forms site, debit card in hand. I typed in the name I'd registered months ago and hit submit. Whistle River Strategies, LLC. Name pulled from a place I used to go fishing with my dad when things got loud at home. The river wasn't big, but it cut through stone. Silent. Patient. Always moving forward. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time. I wasn't going back. Not even if Richard got down on his knees and begged. Not even if Caroline flamed out tomorrow and the board came crawling. I'd spent 9 years building cathedrals out of duct tape, holding it all together while people like Richard played house with the company's future. No more. Now I had something of my own. Quiet. Precise. Sharp enough to cut through everything they built without raising my voice. I shut the laptop. Exhaled. And for the first time in nearly a decade, the air didn't feel borrowed. Felt mine. Monday morning came with the kind of silence that makes your skin itch. Not the peaceful kind, the loaded, waiting to detonate kind. By 9:17 a.m., Richard's office door was already shut. Blinds drawn. Phone to his ear. Voice climbing. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the cadence was unmistakable. Panic dressed up in boardroom vocabulary. At 9:22, the VP of sales stormed past my old cube, face like someone just set fire to his quarterly bonus. That's when I knew. 10 minutes later, the email hit. Subject. Contract status. North Point Systems. Short. Formal. Brutal. After careful consideration, and in light of recent concerns regarding leadership consistency and strategic clarity, North Point Systems will not be renewing our Q4 contract. We value the work done over the past 5 years, and wish you the best moving forward. I'd been the one to land that contract. Back when North Point was just a mid-size upstart trying to scale. We'd weathered 3 infrastructure transitions together. I'd flown out twice to calm their board after budget scares. They didn't send that email lightly, but they sent it. And Richard unraveled. By noon, the entire floor heard it. She presented the wrong data, James. What the hell am I paying you people for? Caroline was nowhere to be found, somewhere recharging with a green smoothie and inspirational podcast, probably. Meanwhile, Richard had sales pinned against the wall like it was 1956 and he still believed yelling fixed things. Poor James, our sales director, stood there blank-faced, arms crossed, not saying a word. Just waiting. When Richard finally paused to breathe, James quietly reached into his messenger bag and pulled out an envelope. "You're firing me?" Richard sneered, snatching it. "No," James replied. "I'm leaving. That's my notice. Effective Friday." It was like watching someone pull the pin from a grenade and calmly set it on the desk. Richard froze. Confused. Then furious. "You're quitting? Now? In the middle of this?" James gave a half-smile, one I knew well. It was the smile of a man who used to sit in on my post-mortem project reviews, who asked real questions instead of parroting buzzwords, who once told me, "If you ever leave, take me with you." He didn't have to say anything more. "You don't walk away from a role like this, James." Richard barked. "You built something here." James stepped back. "Exactly." Then he was gone. People pretended to type, pretended not to look. But the truth settled in like a chill. The first crack had split down the wall and everyone heard it. Clients were bailing. Staff were peeling away. And the one person who could have stabilized it all, well, she was probably busy writing another inspirational quote for Slack. I sat in the break room alone that afternoon, sipping stale coffee, watching the reflection of Richard pacing behind the tinted glass of the executive wing. He kept pulling at his collar, staring at his phone, like the right call could glue this back together. But there was no right call now. He'd made his choice. He'd crowned a fraud. And now the kingdom was bleeding through the floorboards. And me? I was just the ghost watching it happen. No fingerprints. No fireworks. Just the echo of someone they all assumed would never leave, slowly being replaced by the sound of everything falling apart. The moment Caroline stepped up to present, you could feel the collective brace, like watching a toddler reach for a knife. She strutted to the head of the table in heels too high and confidence too brittle, clutching a printout of the quarterly budget like it was a brunch menu. "Thanks everyone for making time," she chirped, flipping open her laptop with a little flair. "I'm so excited to walk you through our Q3 optimization forecast. Big numbers, big goals, big wins." The screen behind her lit up with a pie chart that had more colors than data. The first slide misquoted our international spend by $120K. The second slide listed a client, Radwell Manufacturing, as inactive, even though they just wired a 7-figure renewal last Friday. By the third slide, she was speed-talking so fast even the interns stopped taking notes. And then came the best part. "The delays you're seeing here aren't operational," she insisted, pointing to a bar graph she clearly didn't understand. "They're just due to bugs in the dev spreadsheet, I think. It's pulling from the wrong data stream or whatever." Except it wasn't. That spreadsheet was auto-fed from a back-end system I'd built 6 years ago and retired the same week I handed in my notice. No one had updated the source path. She was looking at live numbers from a deprecated environment and had no idea what that even meant. The silence was spectacular. One board member, Dina the sharp one, tilted her head like she was watching a dog try to do calculus. Another investor muted his mic and started texting. Richard, seated next to her, began blinking like a man being held hostage by his own last name. Caroline, undeterred, barreled ahead into a projection slide that somehow suggested our churn rate would decrease by 4%, while our client list was already down 8% quarter over quarter. The math didn't just not math, it staged a walkout. By the time she wrapped up with, "So yeah, lots of moving parts, but we're trending positive," I swear I could hear someone stifle a laugh. Not out of cruelty. Out of disbelief. You had to respect the delusion. Or fear it. The meeting ended in the kind of limp silence that clings to walls. Caroline beamed like she just nailed a TED Talk. Richard didn't say a word. Just mumbled something about following up next week. The board scattered like roaches. But not before one of the more serious investors, Wells, the kind who never spoke unless the building was actually on fire, pulled Richard aside just barely within earshot. "This," he said slowly, his hand on Richard's shoulder, "was the plan." Richard didn't answer. Just nodded once, then looked down at the floor like it might offer him a better excuse. Back at my apartment, I rewatched the whole thing through a shared backchannel. One of the exec assistants quietly dropped into my inbox. I didn't smile, didn't laugh, didn't gloat. I just watched. Because it wasn't funny. It was grotesque. The kind of corporate horror you only witness when ego drowns competence. Second-hand embarrassment soaked through the room. Not just for her, but for every person who stayed silent while Richard bulldozed reason for a bloodline. I closed the laptop. Whistle River had on board its third client that morning. Real work. Real problems. No buzzwords. No nepotism. Caroline's empire was made of vapor and vibes. And vapor doesn't hold shape for long. Started with a Slack ping. Not to me, of course. Not directly. That would have been too obvious. Too traceable. It went to Tasha, my former senior dev, now the registered founder of Whistle River Strategies, at least on paper. She played the part perfectly. Quiet, brilliant, impossible to read. I handled the strategy. She handled the optics. To the outside world, she was the mind behind the consultancy. I was just a silent advisor. A whisper in the code. The first client came less than 2 weeks after Caroline's budget implosion. A former mid-tier partner who'd grown tired of missed calls and vague updates. Your firm helped Dean fix a vendor backlog in 2022, right? The email said. You wouldn't happen to offer support for real-time SLA tracking now, would you? Tasha played it cool. Sent over a soft proposal with neutral branding and sanitized language. 2 days later, the client signed. No ND. No questions about our leadership. Just relief. The second client came faster. Then a third. By the end of the month, we had 6. And the irony? Half of them were still under contract with Richard's firm. But were bleeding in the gaps left behind by Caroline's quarterly realignments and vanished middle management. So they started paying us on the side to clean up messes her people didn't even know they'd made. Data discrepancies, API mismatches, phantom billings, project timelines that somehow bloated from 6 weeks to 6 months under her streamlined leadership. We get whispered calls late at night from internal managers who just wanted things fixed. No politics. No layers of approval. Just results. We gave them that. Quietly. Elegantly. Efficiently. Meanwhile, inside the old company, things were rotting under the carpet. On the surface, Richard kept pretending it was business as usual, posting anniversary shoutouts and recycled motivational quotes on LinkedIn. We rise together, he'd write, as if that made up for the 14% churn rate no one could plug. But word spreads. It always does. Especially when the right people keep their mouths shut and let their work speak. A VP from a national fintech emailed Tasha after a particularly ugly rollout debacle. Heard your team is fixing what their team keeps breaking. Is that true? Tasha replied with one sentence. We like solving problems other people ignore. They booked a call that afternoon. I wasn't in the room for that one. Didn't need to be. I trained Tasha well. Besides, I was busy reviewing back-end audit logs from another client who just handed us a retainer to quietly rewire the infrastructure their own devs couldn't secure. From a distance, I watched the web build itself client by client, fix by fix. Each contract we signed was a line severed from Richard's sinking ship. And every person who left that place, they knew where to go now. No big speeches. No press releases. Just a whisper campaign rooted in performance. By the time Caroline posted a celebratory update about expanding our strategic framework for Q4, half the comments were bot accounts and pity likes. The rest? Dead silent. I never spoke a word about what I was doing. Didn't need to. Because silence when paired with results gets loud. And for the first time in years I felt something new, not rage, not bitterness, not even triumph. Just pride. Sharp. Clean. Earned. We weren't just winning. We were replacing them brick by broken brick. The calendar invite hit inboxes at 5:42 a.m. Subject line, emergency. Board level alignment call, 8:30 a.m. No agenda. No context. Just all caps panic from Richard's assistant, who by that point had probably aged 10 years in the past 3 weeks. Inside the glass-walled conference room, the energy felt like a funeral run by amateurs. Richard sat at the head of the table, jaw locked, eyes twitching like he hadn't slept. Caroline was nowhere to be seen, likely WFH for mental wellness, after her latest strategic meltdown. But her ghost haunted every page of the report scattered across the polished wood table. Revenue, down 18% quarter-over-quarter. Client churn, up 22% since the last forecast. Employee turnover, nearly 30% in one department alone. And then came the kicker. Legal cleared their throat. "We've identified at least 4 separate breaches of NDA language," she said, not looking up from her notes. "All from internal personnel. Shared internal procedures, scope documents, and even Slack screenshots. Each incident is traceable. Some of them came from company-issued devices." The room stilled. Nobody dared blink. "What do you mean breaches?" Richard asked, voice gravelly. "Your people are leaking internal operations to outside vendors. Confidential workflows. Client timelines. Private correspondence." She paused. "Some of it's already been acted on. By third parties." "Third parties like who?" one of the board members demanded. Silence. Then Dina, the one who always saw through bullshit, leaned back in her chair and asked the question that detonated the room. "Is it true that one of our former staff launched Whistle River?" A few heads turned. Richard blinked. Swallowed. "They're pulling our top accounts," she said flatly. "I've seen the invoices." That was it. The room went hot. A COO stood up, muttering curses. The CFO asked, "How the hell did this happen?" Another board member demanded to know who Whistle River even was. Someone else whispered, "Is it Dean? Was that his LLC?" Richard stayed frozen, mouth open like he might form words if only his brain could catch up to the collapse happening in real time. He tried eventually. "We don't have confirmation it's him." But even he didn't believe that. Not anymore. The name had been floating in the margins for weeks. Clients mentioning Dean's team. Staff disappearing without exit interviews. Vendors tightening their terms after years of partnership. And now that the board knew, there was no stuffing it back in the box. Wells, the investor who rarely spoke, just shook his head. "You lost your best architect. Then you handed his role to your sister, who can't tell a KPI from a PDF. Now you're hemorrhaging accounts and legals waving red flags like it's the Indy 500. So tell me, Richard, what exactly was your plan?" Richard flinched like he'd been slapped. No one defended him. Not this time. The silence turned violent. Everyone looking around, searching for a scapegoat, but all the usual targets were gone. James? Gone. Tasha? Gone. Amir? Gone. The people who used to take the bullets had quietly walked out the side door and built their own armory. And Caroline? Ghosted. Not even a Slack "sorry y'all" to smooth the crater she left behind. Richard's face collapsed in on itself. Red splotches on his neck. Sweat at the temples. He looked like a man trying to wake up from his own nightmare. And failing. Outside the conference room, I imagine the staff sat at their desks pretending not to hear the shouting. Pretending not to notice the investors pacing. Pretending they hadn't all secretly bookmarked Whistle River's website just in case the layoff started before Friday. Inside, Richard had no more mirrors left to break. And no one to clean up the shards. The email came in at 2:11 a.m. No subject, no greeting, no punctuation. Just 3 words. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a solid minute. The sender? Richard. Of course. Sent from his personal Gmail, probably hunched over his laptop in some overpriced loft with a whiskey glass in one hand and a legal pad of regrets in the other. I could almost picture it. Shirt wrinkled, tie loose, TV flickering in the background, and Caroline nowhere in sight. Maybe she was taking space, or recalibrating her energy, with some retreat in Sedona. Or maybe she'd already ghosted him too. Either way, the silence must have been deafening. I didn't reply. Not for 3 days. Not because I was busy, though let's be clear, I was busy onboarding our 9th client. But because some silences deserve to be savored. When I finally answered, it was with a single line. "I think you've heard enough." Below it, I attached a PDF, crisp, clean, and legally bulletproof. It was the non-compete waiver Richard had signed 4 years ago during one of those performative, "we trust our people" policy changes. At the time, it was pitched as a progressive HR move to build employee goodwill. He never imagined it would be used by someone with the memory of an elephant and the patience of a monk. The file was time-stamped, signed by him, legally binding. He gave me freedom. I gave him silence. I never heard back. But 2 weeks later a message came, not from Richard, from the board. The subject line: Strategic Recovery Conversation, Proposal Invite. They wanted me to come in, present a pathway out of the wreckage. Quietly off record. No press, no headlines. Just a chance to fix what their golden boy and his sister had shattered. Said they'd reconsider future leadership models and discuss long-term placement options. Translation: Please save us from the house fire we lit. I didn't laugh. I didn't even get angry. I just closed the email and let it sit there, unread, marked bold. And then I deleted it. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's moving so far past someone that they can't even see your dust trail anymore. That Friday I took a walk. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Just a slow, steady walk past the old headquarters. The blinds were half drawn. The logo out front was already weathering, corners peeling. Like even the signage wanted to leave. I didn't stop. Didn't gloat. Just walked by with a coffee in hand and a calm in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Across the street in a second-story loft our new office was humming. Tasha was presenting. Amir was onboarding a new hire. A pot of burnt coffee was already brewing in the corner. It was perfect. No headlines. No takedown speech. No fireworks. Just brick by nepotistic brick, their empire had collapsed. And all I had to do was walk away.